back. Today, we'll be talking about choices. Sometimes easy, oftentimes confusing, and occasionally outside the box. How you can gain more clarity when it comes to the decisions you have to make in life. Now let's see what we can learn together today. Welcome to the Living Above the Noise podcast, where we are reclaiming family life for the intentional Christian mom. I'm your host, Terry Covey. If you want to know a little bit more about me, head back to the trailer and episode number 1 to learn more. I know you have options for how to spend your time, but you chose to spend it with me, and for that, I'm honored. I'll work hard to use your time wisely and give you lots to chew on as you move on to your week. Thanks for being here. Every day we make choices. Whether you're making a breakfast or deciding what to wear in the morning, your brain is making upward of 35,000 decisions every day. That's roughly 2,000 decisions per hour and 1 decision every 2 seconds. Should I take this call, turn left, or wait for the light to change? Let the kids argue a minute longer so I can finish the dishes? Take a job to help with the finances? See the doctor for that small lump? You get the point. We make a lot of decisions. Some are big and some are small, but they each use our brain cells nonetheless. The life of a woman didn't used to be as complex as it is today. Life and living it took so much time that there wasn't much left for the extras we have today. You know, all the things. All the possibilities open for us today. Now, I'm a huge proponent of opportunity and possibility, but there is such a thing as having too much to choose from. Think Hobby Lobby, Instagram Reels, and Google, just to name a few. The world of a woman and a mom can be pretty overwhelming. And the best way we can make peace with all those options is to have a clear picture of our goals and a solid sense of God's love and care for us as we seek His will in and among all the noise. I pray this episode will cause you to think about the possibilities in your life. Some you might need to say no to, and maybe some exciting new ones. Perhaps it will give you permission to make a choice you've been putting off. Maybe it'll help you realize your responsibility for an outcome of that choice. And if you're fresh off one of those I wish I had chosen differently decisions, I'm here to remind you of God's grace and how to take a bit more thought and prayer next time. It's important to remember that we all make our choices differently at different times, sometimes just because God or our intuition or gut tells us it's the right thing to do. And other times it's with deep thought and introspection and great care as to what it will look like for our family, our marriage, our home life, and for our community. But even when the results aren't what you expect, God is always at work. He's always challenging you to grow and offering both opportunities and trials along the way. There are so many facets about making choices, making decisions that lead to those choices, that you might find me bouncing around a little bit here, but hang with me. We'll start with choices, the repercussions and consequences of them. Repercussions, by definition, is an unintended consequence occurring sometime after an event or action, especially an unwelcome one, a byproduct or a ripple. And then the definition for consequence is a result or effect of an action or condition, ramification, outcome, conclusion of those choices. I'm sure you've heard that making one choice doesn't come without having to say no to something else. Your yes often means way more than you expected. A yes in marriage, or to having children, or to your kids' education, whether you live on a farm or move to the city, all these mean much more than just that first choice. Every choice is going to have rewards or consequences and repercussions, like ripples that fan out to your future and your kids and their kids. I have the privilege of watching my kids raise their kids, and it amazes me how many things they do because they saw it as beneficial or good for them. And I get to see what they change because of what they didn't prefer or for other reasons. So now that we looked at some of the negatives or the end results, let's get back to how to make better choices. In episodes 1 through 4, we covered the basics of Titus 2, chapters 3 through 5. You've heard me say them often. Marriage, children, and homemaking. But there's one part we need to discuss. It's more of a heart issue, and it has impact on your choices in life. As the older woman, I encourage the younger woman, that's you, to love your husbands, love your children, to be sensible, pure workers at home, and kind. So we don't want to overlook the next part, which also says being subject to your own husband, so the word of God will not be dishonored. We'll save that discussion for another episode, but the heart of that command is to listen to and heed his thoughts and ideas, which relates directly to choices that you make as a couple. So, back to the sensible, pure, and kind exhortation from that verse. It seems pretty easy to understand, but let's solidify that by looking at what the Oxford Dictionary says. Sensible means by a course or of an action chosen in accordance with wisdom or prudence, likely to be of benefit, and about an object, practical and functional rather than decorative. And pure means not mixed or adulterated with any other substance or material, without any extraneous or unnecessary elements, free of any contamination. And then there's the word kind, which means having or showing a friendly, generous, and considerate nature, affectionate or loving. Wow. Do any of those words pop for you? They sure do for me. They help clearly see why our choices are so very important to God. The Bible highlights each of these words. We saw sensible in 1 Timothy 2:9 in the last episode when it talked about not just dressing for decoration, but having it be the hidden person of the heart. And that would be where kindness comes in. And then we look at the pure, where we hear the words, free of any contamination, not mixed with other substances. And as Christians, we know these are the things of the world or of our flesh that God tells us over and over in the Bible how we're not to mix with ungodliness. So just getting these few words down, sensible, pure, and kind, will help us to understand how we can better move forward even when it comes to making choices. Or maybe I should say, especially when it comes to making choices. So, as I was thinking about this episode and the idea of choices, I was realizing that as a Christian, we have two pretty important factors to keep top of mind when we're making our choices. The first one is that we ultimately can and must trust God, wholeheartedly surrender to Him. If we don't have that basic foundation behind us, we're going to base our decisions on things that might go against the character of God. And we might worry and fret that our choices might be wrong. I can share countless ways in my early Christian years of how I overthought and didn't trust God. It's kind of funny. Well, funny, not funny, because my husband and I have always been bad at making choices together. We kind of have always had FOMO. And think about what FOMO really is. Ultimately, it's a lack of trust in God. I think it wasn't until I realized that, the idea of missing out. Missing out on what? God's plan? Or just what others had or did? Once I realized it, I could begin to set boundaries for myself as to how much I let my mind wander and worry. If you tend toward FOMO, and I think social media has made it way too easy to do, can you see how trusting in your Father can heal you of it? I mean, if God has something for you, eventually it will be yours. Here's a few verses for you. Proverbs chapter 3, 5 through 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. And then there's Matthew 6:34. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. So we're not to fret or worry about our decisions. We can truly trust God with our future. Now, the second aspect of choices and how to make better ones is knowing what you believe in, and what you believe about God. Like I shared in episode 5, you knowing your value to God, how He values you, how He created you, and that He has work for you to do, it adds up, all of it, to you being so much more free to make the choices you believe in. You'll be much less tempted to just pick what you saw online. And please don't think that online is the only temptation. I lived way before computers and cell phones and social media. Decades ago, my friends and I were trying to be and do and have what everyone else was doing or had. Temptation isn't a modern invention. Only the tools to lure us are. This desire to look outside ourselves for what promises happiness. Remember Eve? 1 John chapter 2, verse 16 says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world." And then Psalm 37:4 says to, rather, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. So, where it says He'll give you the desires of your heart, what happens when our desires aren't in line with His Word? And you kind of know it's your flesh or your feelings. Ask me how I know. Well, they'll result in some fruit you might not expect, some unripe fruit, or sometimes rotten fruit. I'm sure you've been there just like I have. But the truth in this verse is really pretty simple. Delight in God's goodness, and when you do that, the desires of your heart will line up with His desires, which helps keep your choices in line also. And these choices set you apart as a kingdom woman. When you know your value in the kingdom, when you get right with God, surrendering to His plan, it will be so much easier to set your pace and your foundation firmly where He has you. No, it's not easy. Remember, we never really arrive, not until heaven. You and I are a constant work in progress. But the best part, the next time you hear of something new, something that catches your attention and makes you sit up and take notice, and it happens to fit with the pace you've set and your firm foundation, then you'll be so much more confident to try it. And you'll know that with your trust in God, even if after giving it a whirl, it's not going like planned, you won't have to feel bad. Whenever you discover it wasn't really yours to do or have, you're going to be okay. You can let it go because you know you serve a God who loves and cares for you, for your family, and your future. So I'm going to share of a time in my life about choices and letting them go, or not. 20 years ago, we made a huge and impulsive decision to leave our community of 18 years. We left my parents and we took their 10 grandkids away to Tennessee, which was a 24-hour drive away. We made one of those hard choices to give our kids the chance to settle as adults in a state that had much lower housing costs, hopefully giving them a leg up in the world. But one thing we didn't count on was how we as a couple would handle giving up our life, our extended family, and our community of almost 2 decades. To put it bluntly, we call it our crash and burn move. We really didn't fare well. I was still in the mode of trying to live life on my own strength, of not trusting God with our future, and even with the decisions we'd made. So I fretted and worried and filled my home with the stress that comes from indecision. It wasn't pretty. But God was at work. He always is. And one bit of advice that stands out from that difficult time was a simple statement my sister told me during a phone call. "Nothing is permanent," she said. She was reminding me that we can undo a decision. We can actually stop doing this thing that's upsetting our life. Did I listen to her? No. Believe it or not, we reeled from that move for a decade. Y'all, FOMO can really suck the life out of you. We felt unstable in all our ways. And why? Because we hadn't yet learned those 2 principles. First, we didn't ultimately trust God. We hadn't learned to rely on Him and His mercy and grace. We hadn't surrendered. No, that would take several more years. And second, we didn't know what we believed about our move. Sure, we wanted to give our kids a better shot at adulthood, but it wasn't enough to combat our own fear and insecurities. We just weren't ready. But my sister's words have come back to me often. We really can alter course and let things go. Now, of course, we know some things are permanent, or at least should be, like marriage and having children. God intends we stay the course on those relationships, even though they might not be turning out the way you hoped or imagined. Possibly He's frustrating you more than you expected, or your kids take way more of your energy than you ever thought possible. Maybe you thought you were going to love it a whole lot more than you do. But here's something to chew on. Perhaps you forgot to turn it over to God, to bank on the fact that He has work for you to do in those roles, these permanent ones, the ones you can't get out of or shouldn't. Even as I'm speaking this, I'm seeing a glitch in my thinking, in my attitudes and actions, and I think we all struggle with it. So what I'm wondering is, if we know in our hearts these are permanent roles, why do we complain and fret? Why can't we just do our job and seek God's best in and through it all? I guess that's an age-old question, but one we really should consider and strive for, don't you think? Again, it helps to see how having confidence in knowing your value, knowing why God put you on earth, really trusting in Him, and knowing what He requires of you, and how much He cares for you, it really helps you stand against your temptation to covet, worry, and complain. And that brings us back to choices, accepting them, being able to stay the course when you followed godly wisdom and direction in choosing them, and, get this, being willing to sometimes let them go when it's not going well, and perhaps it wasn't in line with what's best in the first place. Consider Esther's story. It's a beautiful example of someone who chose well. Her situation was what most of us would consider unbearable. She lost her parents and was raised by her cousin. You know, I never knew that. I thought Mordecai was her uncle, but it says she was Mordecai's uncle's daughter. Interesting, huh? Then she was taken into the king's harem for a year-long ritual of beautification in preparation to be presented to the king to become his queen. I can't even imagine. But get this, Esther did her best with it. She trusted Mordecai and she trusted God. She honored the king and saved her people. So remember, Esther was a woman. You and I are women. We just have to seek to develop that kind of faith. And I think we can admit that our husband or our kids, in most situations, of course, are a lot less devastating than being stolen from our home and given to a king as his bride. So considering Esther's amazing example of faith, do you have areas in your life where you need to accept how God is doing His perfect work? Can you see the potential of the work He's given you, like Esther did, for such a time as this? Now here's a place that will take a little pause. I'm going to give you a half a minute or so to think about these questions, about the choices you've made, recently or ones that stand out from a different season of your life. I'll put a copy of them in the show notes if you want to refer back to them later. Do your choices reflect your trust in God? Are your choices glorifying God? Do they reflect what you believe? Or might you be doing them for another reason? Are they pleasing you or pleasing others? Are they advancing God's kingdom? Are you making a difference in your home or in your community? You know, in all of my life coach training, the answering of these personal questions was the most impacting. The ability to look within yourself, to really ask and answer questions, can make a huge difference in where you head from here. So, going back to my dark and confusing season in Tennessee, my friend Tammy mailed me a quote printed in her favorite font and even laminated. I guess she knew I'd still need it 20 years later. It said, "Do not doubt in darkness what God revealed to you in the light." Johnny Erickson Tada. You see, in our feeble human existence, God reveals truth to us. And often it's during a Bible study or Sunday sermon or while we're taking a walk. Often it's when we're in the light. But as humans, it's too easy to enter into a season of despair or darkness or trial, and we forget that revelation, the promise or grace offered us. This simple quote reminds me that darkness will come, and to hold on to the truth right in the middle of it. My friend, God keeps His promise, even when you don't see it. You know, I get to see that quote every day on my bathroom mirror. It's such an inspiration, not only to know that we have lifelong friends on this planet, but also that we can gain wisdom from one another, and wisdom from someone like Johnny, who lived with what most of us would consider an unimaginable trauma and hardship in life. Her social media posts are a constant encouragement to me. You can find her at Johnny and Friends. I know you'll be blessed. I'm going to share a more recent event in my life, and it's a really good example of not doubting a choice. You know, we have a huge family. We have 10 kids and 23 grandkids, and we're pretty much constantly busy. And there are times I kid around with everybody and say, whose idea was this? But you know what? God is at work all through our life. So, a few weeks ago, as I was planning the copy for one of my podcasts, I was in my daughter's living room waiting for her 20-month-old twins and 3-year-old to wake up. This was the day I needed to get my podcast written, recorded, and ready to go for the coming week. And because my husband and daughter were away for the entire day and evening, this was my day to do it. I had the day alone. But instead, here I am, writing in little snippets of time in my daughter's living room. So why was I here instead of being at home in my quiet house with my dogs and cats by my side? Because the night before, all night, my son-in-law was at the hospital with my 6-year-old grandson waiting for test results. I was on call for my daughter to join them when she was needed most. So in the wee hours of the morning and with only a few hours sleep, we switched cars and I joined the kids while she raced to the hospital to be there when her son woke up from emergency surgery. All I can say is praise God, because a few generations ago, he wouldn't have made it. So why do I tell you all this? And what does it have to do with choices? A lot. You see, almost 4 decades ago, I gave up plans for a career and made the choice to be a stay-at-home mom and focus on my kids. I knew what I believed, even though I didn't know the God who put the desire in my heart. That was still a few years off, but now I'm here. And I can see again in retrospect the blessing of that decision. I have 23 grandkids, future adults who I get to invest in and show the love of Christ to, and I wouldn't change a thing. I would use this opportunity on that early morning to pour into those little girls with all I could muster. And on that cool fall morning, God wanted me to give up my plans and realize there are other things in life much more important than getting a podcast out on time. And being there for them during this emergency was most important. Do you remember the quote from Tony Evans in episode 5, where he reminds us this: in your personal life as a kingdom woman, it is essential to note that in the good things of life, you should try not to lose the important things. And something else I'll admit to you. 10 or 20 years ago, I would have grumbled and complained about this change of plans. But I have learned, or should I say, I'm still learning daily, that I have choices for my attitudes. And you do too. God has worked an amazing character in me, and He's working on you too. You can learn to stop your fretting, confusion, or anger, to look and listen for His wisdom, and rest assured He's up to something good. Please hear this. Before you know it, Lord willing, you'll be 40 or 50 or 60, and you'll be able to see where your choices have brought you. You'll be able to see what God did with them, where you missed the boat, and how things worked out or didn't. And you'll discover how to better make decisions and what to focus on. And you'll see why the ingredients we're talking about for wise decision-making, trusting God and knowing what you believe, will help you make better choices, and how they help you maintain a better attitude along the way. So, what's going on in your life that you need to reassess your mood or your negativity, your fears or your anger? Do you need to deal with choices already made? What trials are you complaining about today that you might be able to look a little farther in the future, whether it be tomorrow or in a year, to see how it might turn out better than you thought? Because there's the side of growth, the side of character lessons in learning to deny yourself for the good of someone else or the good of your calling that's way more important than what's going on in this present moment. Take time to consider your ways, what you believe in, and what trust in your Heavenly Father looks like day to day. And run your choices, your thoughts, and your ideas through the filter of God's Word. Pray and listen to the Spirit. I hope you'll take time to think through this today. I pray the next time a trial or choice enters in, you'll be able to choose wisely. You'll be able to live above the noise in your head, in your home, and in your world. And then hopefully you'll choose what you know to be the right attitude or action. But guess what? When you feel you've made a bad choice, you'll also be able to trust God for His mercy and grace to see you through, even if you don't feel ready to make the choice to give up or change course. Remember, He cares for you. After 40 years of watching what He's done in my life, I can tell you that He's there and He's waiting and He's patient and He will grow you, especially as you take the time to consider your choices. Now I need to tell you something that happened that morning at my daughter's house. The twins were napping, so I decided to work a bit on my computer. I asked my 3-year-old granddaughter to clean up a few messes in the living room before she started her playtime. And of course, I kind of wondered what that would look like, but I thought I'd try. And you know what? I watched amazed as she spent the next 15 minutes cleaning the entire family room. I mean, she put things in the right drawers. She lined up the little scooters against the wall. There was not a spot of mess in that room. It was amazing. So I'm here to say you really can train your kids and give them opportunities. This is huge, you guys. Give them opportunities to feel valuable as a member of your family. And when I praised her, when I thanked her, when I told her I couldn't believe it, she beamed. All that about training your kids, we'll save that for another episode. Again, I stand in awe at what God has done in my life and how He's used my choices, both good and not so good, to get me where I am. So now for you, how do you see yourself in the future? What do you want your attitude to be? And here's something to think about. What stories will you tell the younger women in your life as you fulfill your Titus II calling? You see, the more you know about God, the more you realize how important choices are to Him and why. Because you're going to make better choices when you're surrendered to Him, and you'll better be able to handle the change of plans when they come. So, sweet wife, dear mama, young woman, God has given you this day. What choices will you make to spend it preparing for a better tomorrow, a better future? So that's it for today. Follow me for my next episode on family mission statements, coming out in 2 weeks. I'll share our story of how we wrote our family mission statement 35 years ago and how it helped us take aim at our family and home life and how it shaped our future. And I have something fun in the works. I want to add a short episode between my main episodes for some fun tips and tricks for home and family life. Let me know what you'd love to hear about. You can like, follow, or message me here or on social media. I love hearing from you. It truly makes my day to know I'm serving you well. God bless.